24-hour global internet blackout won't destroy the economy. The exact moment the internet turns back on will.
Yeah, you probably think digital infrastructure is this, untouchable, decentralized cloud hovering above us. It isn't.
Right.
Today, we are exposing a fatal cognitive distortion. We're going to reveal the hidden, hyper-centralized choke points that make a single day offline a catastrophic black swan event. And we'll show you why the very algorithms designed to protect our global wealth are, well, the exact trigger fingers that will obliterate it.
So we're pulling from two massive intelligence sources for this deep dive. The first is a comprehensive analytical report called Internet Blackout, Economic Black Swan, and the second is the 2026 Alliance Risk Barometer,
Where 47% of global risk experts now rank this exact scenario as a top global threat.
Exactly. Our mission here isn't to just scare you with hypotheticals. It's to map the true anatomy of a digital collapse, layer by layer, and strip away that illusion of stability.
Yeah, let's start with the physical reality. Most people assume the immediate danger of a blackout is just, well, you can't buy things on Amazon or check your email.
Which completely misunderstands how the modern world operates. The danger isn't a pause in consumerism. The danger is that the physical world will literally crush the digital one.
Right. To understand the scale, you have to look at local government-mandated internet shutdowns. Top 10 VPN data from 2025 shows these local disruptions cost the global economy $19.7 billion.
19.7 billion. And that's just localized.
Just localized, yeah. That's a 156% increase from the prior year, driven by 212 major disruptions. But a global blackout, that is exponential.
Because the data from Deloitte and the Global Network Initiative proves that highly integrated countries immediately lose 1.9% of their daily GDP the very second the network drops.
Right. But the silent killer isn't the lost sales. It's something called electronic data interchange, or EDI.
EDI. I've seen that acronym in the logistics data. What exactly is EDI doing that makes it so critical?
It's basically the digital nervous system for global shipping. Modern logistics runs strictly on a just-in-time model. Warehouses don't stockpile months of inventory anymore.
Right, they keep it lean.
Extremely lean. Algorithms order goods so they arrive the exact hour they are needed on the assembly line or the store shelf. EDI is the standard language that lets a supplier's computer talk to a buyer's computer.
Okay, so the internet goes down, and those computers stop talking. But the physical momentum doesn't just stop.
No, not at all.
I mean, freight trucks, trains, cargo ships, they're already in transit. They keep arriving at distribution centers.
And that is the terrifying disconnect. The physical goods arrive, but the warehouse scanners and RFID tags can't reach the central enterprise resource planning servers, the ERP servers.
So the system is just blind.
Entirely blind to the physical reality. And this creates what the data calls ghost orders.
Ghost orders. So imagine your local grocery store. If you walk in 3 days after a blackout, the shelves aren't empty because people panicked and hoarded everything.
Right, they're empty because the semi-truck sitting in the parking lot literally doesn't have the digital authorization to unload.
It's like a restaurant kitchen where the order tickets suddenly stop printing, but the delivery trucks keep dumping raw ingredients into the dining room. Eventually, the building literally suffocates on its own supply.
That's a great way to picture it. And clearing that suffocating backlog is a monumental task. Even on a normal day, with perfect internet, GS1 technical data shows that EDI integration errors cause routine disputes in 5 to 25% of all inbound orders.
Wow, up to 25% on a normal day.
Yeah. And resolving just one of those routine disputes takes about 2 hours of manual labor to track down the paperwork and fix the ledger.
So if you have a 24-hour total blackout, you are generating millions of ghost orders.
Exactly. It would take months of manual reconciliation just to figure out what is sitting in which port.
So the physical world outruns the digital one. But that assumes the digital infrastructure just, happily turns back on after 24 hours.
Which it might not.
Right. The intelligence report suggests the internet itself might actually tear itself apart. We think of hackers breaking the rules to take down the web. But the sources point to a scenario where packets following the rules perfectly are what destroy it.
Yeah, and to understand how, you have to look at the routing map of the internet, which relies on something called the Border Gateway Protocol, or BGP. Think of BGP as the air traffic control for all data.
Okay.
We've seen accidental BGP leaks before. Back in 2020, there was a router incident in Atlanta that accidentally killed 50% of backbone internet traffic for half an hour just by sending bad directions.
Wait, a bad map takes down half the traffic.
Right. But what the report highlights is something far worse called the BGP Vortex. It is a mathematically proven fatal loop.
A fatal loop.
Yeah. Academic researchers have demonstrated that it takes just literally three 100% legitimate BGP update messages to create an infinite loop of routing updates.
Hold on, an infinite loop. What does that actually do to the physical hardware of the internet?
It creates a catastrophic control plane overload. The backbone routers of the internet have physical central processors and memory, just like your laptop.
Oh.
When they get caught in this vortex, they are forced to process routing updates in an endless circle at light speed. It completely fries the processors. They overheat, crash, and physically fail.
Oh, wow.
And here's the truly terrifying part. Modern cryptography protocols like BGP-SEC and RPKI, which were designed to stop hackers, are entirely useless here.
Wait, why wouldn't the security protocols catch it? If you have this vortex overloading the system, how do you block the attack without blocking the actual internet?
You can't. The security protocols verify if a message is from an authentic source. In the BGP Vortex, the traffic forming the link is cryptographically authentic. It is fully authorized.
That's a chilling thought. The system just accepts the commands that kill it.
Yeah. Its own logic is weaponized against itself. And if the routing vortex doesn't kill the network, the domain name system, DNS, will.
How so?
The entire global web, every website you type into your browser, ultimately relies on just 13 logical root servers named A through M.
Just 13.
Just 13. When you type in a URL, your local network usually remembers the IP address for a little while. That's called a time-to-live record, or a local cache. But if those 13 root servers go down due to an internal error or a massive attack, those local caches simply expire.
Meaning my computer suddenly forgets where everything is.
Exactly. Within hours, the internet physically shatters into millions of isolated IP islands. You couldn't navigate to a server sitting in the room right next to you, let alone across the globe.
Which completely shatters the illusion of the cloud. I mean, we picture the cloud as this ethereal, invincible thing floating in the sky.
Yeah, it's definitely not in the sky.
Right. The cloud is actually sitting in a 1930s basement in Manhattan, and it relies on an underwater extension cord.
That's a very accurate way to put it. About 99% of all intercontinental data traffic travels through physical underwater cables that are no thicker than a garden hose.
A garden hose? That's insane.
And the entire global economy funnels through a handful of geographic choke points. For instance, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea handles 90% of Euro-Asian traffic.
90%.
Yeah. You also have Boudet in the UK, Fortaleza in Brazil, the Luzon Strait in Southeast Asia.
But the report emphasizes that the hidden vulnerability isn't necessarily cutting the cable in the deep, dark ocean. The Achilles heel is sitting right on the beach.
Correct. It's called the PFE, the power feed equipment. Optical laser signals carrying the data degrade over oceanic distances. They need physical repeaters on the ocean floor to boost the signal every few dozen miles.
Okay, so they need a power source.
Exactly. Those repeaters require high voltage direct current electricity, which is fed from the PFE on land. If an adversary destroys the PFE on the beach or triggers a specific short circuit, the ocean floor goes permanently dark.
And I imagine you can't just call a local electrician to fix a fried repeater at the bottom of the Atlantic.
Not at all. Fixing it requires rare, specialized cabling ships and something called complex optical time domain reflectometry just to locate the fault.
Yeah.
That process takes weeks.
Weeks. We treat the internet like a decentralized, invincible organism, but physically, it has a jugular vein. And on land, that vulnerability is just as concentrated. The intelligence report mentions carrier hotels.
Yes. If you look at 60 Hudson Street or 111 8th Avenue in New York City, these are massive 1930s-era buildings. Inside them are MMRs or Mimi rooms.
Mimi rooms.
Yeah. This is the physical location where Tier 1 telecommunications providers literally plug their fiber optic cables into each other. Despite having backup generators and power redundancies, the extreme density of these connections creates a paradoxical single point of failure.
So it's all in one room.
Basically. A localized fire or physical sabotage in just one of these rooms would instantly fragment the North American internet.
It's shockingly exposed. But let's follow the timeline here. Let's say the internet goes dark, the supply chains freeze, the routers fail, and then 24 hours later, the connection is miraculously restored.
Right.
As we teased at the very beginning, the true financial apocalypse doesn't happen while the screens are black. It triggers the exact second the Wi-Fi reconnects. The data calls it the reconnection shock.
Yeah, and to understand why the reconnection is fatal, you have to look at the shadow banking sector. We aren't talking about your retail checking account at a local branch. We're talking about hedge funds, broker-dealers, and trillions of dollars in overnight repo markets.
Let's unpack that for a second. What exactly is the overnight repo market and why does a blackout destroy it?
Think of the repo market like a massive overnight pawn shop for the global financial elite. Institutions need short-term cash, so they hand over safe assets like U.S. Treasury bonds as collateral for a loan that usually lasts just one day. Okay.
The next morning, they repay the cash and get their bonds back. It all relies on absolute second-by-second electronic verification. In a 24-hour blackout, that entire global market suffers an instant catastrophic freeze. No electronic clearing means massive fails to deliver.
So the pawn shop door is locked, and no one can get their collateral back or pay their debts. And the risk multiplies exponentially because of something called rehypothecation.
Exactly. Rehypothecation is a complex term for a very dangerous practice. It means the exact same piece of collateral is used multiple times in long, opaque chains between different institutions.
Like a chain reaction waiting to happen.
Yes. Bank A uses a bond to borrow from Bank B, who uses that same bond to borrow from Bank C. In a blackout, you can't calculate variation margins, the daily cash true-ups required to keep these trades balanced. You can't calculate the haircuts on collateral.
You essentially have total informational asymmetry and a complete loss of trust. Millions of contracts technically go into default in the dark. Yes. So imagine the tension building up over 24 hours. The entire global financial system is holding its breath. Then the internet comes back online.
What happens when the connection returns?
The algorithms wake up. Automated risk management bots will scan the markets and instantly detect an unprecedented, massive spike in volatility and uncertainty. Their strictly programmed mathematical response will be to immediately demand massive additional collateral to cover the perceived risk.
But nobody has extra cash sitting around.
Right. Because nobody has cash, lenders will execute automatic fire sales of prime assets to raise capital.
But wait, wouldn't the stock exchanges just institute circuit breakers? They wouldn't just let bots sell off the global economy to zero in 3 seconds, right?
That's a really common misconception. Circuit breakers are triggered by price drops on a centralized public exchange like the New York Stock Exchange. But the repo market and institutional shadow banking operate largely outside of those traditional exchange circuit breakers.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a decentralized panic. This simultaneous algorithmic dumping will crash sovereign bond markets, corporate debt, and real estate globally before a human can even hit a kill switch.
And the decentralized finance world, DeFi and crypto, is completely vulnerable to this too, despite claiming to be outside the traditional system.
Completely vulnerable. It all comes down to the oracle problem. Blockchains are inherently isolated. Smart contracts cannot see real-world prices on their own. They rely on external data feeds called oracles, like Chainlink, to tell them what a dollar or a stock is currently worth.
So during a blackout, Oracle nodes obviously can't communicate.
Exactly. The smart contracts freeze with inconsistent state updates, reflecting prices from 24 hours ago.
So when the internet comes back,
An avalanche of delayed real-world price updates slams into the blockchain all at once. Highly leveraged DeFi protocols will suddenly realize thousands of positions are underwater based on the new data.
and they just liquidate everything.
Yes, they will trigger an automatic liquidation cascade, forcefully wiping out leveraged positions. We actually saw a micro version of this in the $19.3 billion flash crash of October 2025.
19 billion wiped out that fast.
And Wall Street knows this is coming, by the way. SIFMA, a leading financial trade group, conducts massive Quantum Dawn the 7th drills to prepare for these exact clearing failures. But while 80% of major banks claim to have 24-hour survival protocols, they completely ignore the interconnected, unregulated non-banks that will actually start the chain reaction.
So just to be crystal clear here, the automated safety mechanisms, the risk algorithms designed to protect the banks from losing money, are actually the trigger fingers that will shoot the global economy the second they come back online.
Yes. The system's defense mechanism becomes its method of suicide. And this lethal automation extends far beyond finance. It directly infects the physical infrastructure keeping people alive.
Meaning the hospitals.
Right. A blackout transforms life-saving medical devices and the power grid into silent, ticking time bombs.
Let's talk about the medical side first. We're looking at the Internet of Medical Things, the IOMT.
Modern hospitals are completely reliant on cloud-only systems, like the Epic electronic medical record software. When you sever the connection, hybrid medical devices throw errors, and doctors lose access to real-time patient charts.
That's terrifying.
We have hard data on this. During the July 2024 CrowdStrike outage, a study of 759 hospitals showed that 21.8% of hospital internet-dependent services directly impacted immediate patient care. A blackout means an instant lethal loss of treatment protocols.
But the threat to the power grid is even more malicious because it's not just an outage. It involves adversarial AI.
This is where it gets incredibly dark. SCADA systems, the software that controls national power grids and industrial machinery, used to be isolated from the public internet.
Right, the old air-gapped system.
Yeah, but now, for efficiency, they are integrated into the public cloud. Highly skilled, advanced persistent threat groups, or APTs, can secretly plant self-learning AI models inside the grid's infrastructure.
And they just sit there.
They sit silently for months, analyzing the subtle load balancing patterns, substation switching cycles, and the exact temperature limits of industrial transformers.
Yeah. So they're basically studying the grid's exact breaking points.
Yeah.
But how does software physically melt metal?
By understanding the hardware's safety limits better than the human operators, when the 24-hour blackout hits, human dispatchers are suddenly struck blind. They can't see the grid status, so they can't manually route power to stabilize it.
Oh, I see.
That is when the adversarial AI strikes from within. It actively shifts power cycles precisely during peak hours to overload the system. It rapidly toggles safety switches to generate immense friction and heat without allowing any cooldown period. It literally cooks the heavy transformers from the inside out, turning a temporary digital glitch into a kinetic multi-month disaster.
It's like a burglar who doesn't just cut your alarm line. They secretly live in your walls, learn your daily schedule, wait for a thunderstorm to knock out the power, and then turn your own smart home appliances against you while you're fumbling in the dark.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And what makes this so profoundly dangerous is the cognitive dissonance surrounding it. The people who actually build the technology are the most terrified because they know they've forgotten how to fix it.
Yeah, the sentiment analysis from the intelligence report on this is staggering. The disconnect between the public and the engineers is vast. You have Gen Z on Reddit actively romanticizing a blackout.
Yes, the sentiment data shows young users planning to watch DVDs and take a mental health break from social media. They view it as a forced vacation.
A vacation.
Yeah, they are completely unaware of the just-in-time logistics collapse that will empty their local supermarket shelves by day 3. But if you shift over to specialized developer forums like Hacker News, there's sheer panic over a phenomenon being called digital dementia 2.0.
What exactly is digital dementia in this context?
It's the reality that software engineers have become entirely reliant on AI tools. Developers today use large language models and AI copilots for everything. In anonymous forums, they openly admit they have forgotten basic operating system commands, complex Git syntax, and manual diagnostic skills.
So they rely on the cloud to build the cloud.
Right. If the internet breaks, access to those AI tools vanishes instantly.
This is a wild paradox. If the engineers literally can't remember how to code without AI, who exactly is going to manually rebuild the infrastructure when the AI is offline?
That is the paralyzing question. It fundamentally alters the timeline for recovery. A system that took hours to fix 10 years ago might take weeks to fix now because the institutional muscle memory is gone.
The knowledge is just gone.
Completely. And as I mentioned, we might not even be dealing with human hackers or AI sabotage. We are currently in the solar maximum of 2025 to 2026. This introduces the astrophysical trigger.
Geomagnetically induced currents, or GIC?
When a massive coronal mass ejection from the sun hits Earth, the resulting geomagnetic storms induce massive electrical currents in the ocean. The glass fiber optics and the underwater cables are fine. They don't conduct electricity.
Right.
But those critical copper power lines feeding the submarine repeaters we talked about earlier, the Stanford University research in our sources shows a 1.6 to 12% chance per decade of a solar storm strong enough to burn out those repeaters globally.
12% is not a small number for something this catastrophic.
No, it's not. If the sun scorches that hardware at the bottom of the ocean, you aren't looking at a 24-hour blackout.
Yeah.
You are looking at weeks of total darkness while specialized ships try to dredge up and replace the physical tables.
The sheer fragility of this whole ecosystem is staggering. We've mapped out the ghost orders, the BGP routing vortex, the financial reconnection shock, and the physical vulnerabilities. But there's a final shift in perception we have to address before we go. Governments are fully aware of everything we've just discussed, and they have prepared accordingly. Not to save the commercial internet, but to isolate themselves from it.
This is documented reality. In the U.S., you have SOP 303, Standard Operating Procedure 303. It is a classified, legally authorized protocol to physically kill commercial wireless networks during a national crisis.
A literal kill switch.
Yes. The Department of Homeland Security fought in court for years to keep the technical implementation details of this kill switch classified, and they won. SOP 303 is deeply tied to continuity of government, or COG, protocols. Federal agencies maintain classified hybrid mesh networks designed strictly to bypass the public internet.
So they aren't trying to make sure our Netflix keeps running or even that our bank accounts are accessible. They are ensuring they can communicate and govern while we are in the dark.
And we have seen this architectural isolation executed flawlessly on an international scale. Look at Iran's digital darkness during mass protests.
Right.
Through centralized filtering and deep packet inspection, the Iranian government successfully choked global internet access for the population down to just 4% of its normal capacity. But here is the critical part. They didn't crash their own economy.
How did they manage that?
Their internal Shoma network, their banking systems, and their critical state industry remained perfectly functional. They executed a surgical blackout.
The ultimate threat isn't just that the internet is fragile. It's that hyper-connectedness is the perfect economic self-destruct mechanism. And your own government has already built, tested, and legally authorized the kill switch. They know how to survive the dark. The question is, will the next global blackout be a catastrophic accident or a mathematically calculated amputation?